I guess I'll start with my background. I'm a 33-year-old female, but this story takes place when I was a teenager living in a suburb of Chicago. The village I lived in was quiet and middle class. We lived like a mile from the police station, and the worst crimes we had was a murder or two and robbery once in a blue moon. 99% of the time, boring and more boring. Unless you had a car, you were stuck just walking around the park at night with your friends. Kind of boring. Anyway, one night, my girlfriend and I decided to go hang out at a park with some guys at like 12 midnight. The night was a bit windy and had a full moon. I even got a kiss that night from the boy I liked. But the night wasn't just fun and hanging out late. There's a deep forest in the park with a stream with a playground right next to it. The same playground we went to with swings and jungle gym columns. There's two bridges, one of wood, the one everyone uses, and one bridge made of rocks. That's rarely used because it is deeper in the forest, over the stream connecting the two halves of the forest and park area. I'll get to the rock bridge in a minute. We hung around on the swings and chatted and just spent the evening together. I'm sitting and just looking around, talking and enjoying the peace and quiet and the moonlight. I have a full view of the forest and the dip of earth that I know leads to the stream. I see something moving over that dip of earth, some dark shape. It looked like it was crawling out of the forest. An arm, then another arm. It pulls itself out of the ditch and stream. A figure darker than the surrounding forest. And I'm sitting there, frozen. I think I'm seeing things. It just kind of lays there on the ground, but doesn't move. A flash of fear grips me. What if it comes this way? I look to my friends and no one notices anything. I look back and it's gone. Did it go back or go somewhere? I really want to get out of here. Then one friend says, "Did you guys hear about this urban legend of the rock bridge over the stream? Apparently, some kids or something played on the bridge and fell over and died." What a thing to say after what I saw. But I didn't ask anyone anything and just pretended I didn't see anything. The experience stuck with me. I'd never talked about it because it must have been my imagination. Things like that happen only in scary movies, right? But I rarely went to that park after that. And the black thing, if you are real, I hope we never meet again. Who knows what would have happened if you saw me the same time I saw you. My first experience with the supernatural was one of the most terrible life experiences I can remember. It happened when I was young and dumb and wanted to go out into the world and explore. While I was out of my home country of Canada, I witnessed a horror I soon hope to forget. I had gone on a trip with some of my buddies to Montana, which is just below my home province of Alberta. We were originally going to stay in Yellowstone National Park, but decided to head to Glacier National Park first before camping out at Yellowstone for a few days. We finally reached Glacier Park after a 6-hour drive and had just enough time to do a little hiking before going to our hotel in the nearby town to rest and move on towards Yellowstone. We had gotten to the park around 4:30 and decided it was a great idea to hike after dark, so we hiked up the trail looking at the glorious views of rivers and waterfalls of the Avalanche Creek Trail. The light began to fade rather quickly while we were about 2/3 of the way up, and we had hiked into the trail about 10 kilometers or 6 miles, so it would take us about 2 hours to walk back down from that point. Well, this is when everything goes pretty much downhill. Myself and my friends were all outdoorsmen and loved to go hiking and travel around the Rocky Mountains, but we were still inexperienced when it came to night hiking. Since the trail we were on wasn't as traveled at this part of the hike, the trail was hard to follow in the dark, although every now and then we would see a sign that notified us that we were going in the right direction. At some point, maybe 1/3 of the way down the mountain, we ended up going off the trail, following a little rabbit trail, thinking we were still on the correct path. We began to figure out that we were definitely not going the right way, as my friend checked his compass, showing we were heading deeper into the Rocky Mountains, miles and miles of forest. Then begins the mass panic. My friends and I immediately turned around and began walking the way we came, but the trail we were following didn't look the same as it had been before, leading us to being even more lost than before. That is when we collectively noticed how quiet it had gotten. No insects, no birds, no nothing. It was dead silence. I knew this was a bad sign, as I'm a hunter, and when it gets quiet like this, it means that there is a large predator around and that it is hunting. We had literally become prey to some unknown beast in the woods. We all began getting a sudden spike of anxiety. When I let the guys know what was up, that's when we hear it. A noise that brought terror, a guttural howl from up the mountain. It was then followed by many more. My heart went into my throat, and the terror I felt made me shake. Most of my friends did the same. All but 2 had already begun running in a direction opposite the howls. We all followed soon after, running ourselves ragged until we looked behind and saw the eye shine of something that was much larger than we had anticipated. The eyes were at least 6 feet off the ground and moving towards us at a very fast pace. That's when we split up, running in random directions, hoping to lose these beasts. It was never going to happen. I could hear the breath of one of these things about 20 feet behind me and gaining. All of a sudden, my friend appears from the trees to my right, and we end up running together until I cut off from him, hoping to escape. I know I left him to die that night, but it was a last-ditch effort that worked out to my advantage. I heard his screams from my left and ran as fast as I could away from them, with tears rolling down my face as I hear his screams for help and him shrieking in pain. Then nothing, as if he never existed. I continue running down the mountain until I see a familiar sight ahead of me. It was one of the trail signs showing how far you were on the trail. I stopped, checked where I was, and started running again, hoping to get away from the creatures on the mountain. Another kilometer or half a mile down the trail, I began hearing howls getting closer and closer by the moment, causing me to run even harder. Looking ahead, I see the sign saying parking lot and zoom past it in my panic, looking for the keys in my pocket and scrambling towards the only vehicle still left in the parking lot, which was my car. I use my fob to unlock my car from a distance and run as fast as I can towards it, slamming into the side of my door and opening it, hopping in and starting the car. I look out of my window towards the trail entrance and see two pairs of eyes staring at me from just out of the range of the lampposts. They stare at me before disappearing back into the brush as I drive away, never looking back. I arrived at the ranger station by the park entrance and ran inside, looking disheveled and terrified. I began telling the ranger at the desk what had just happened. He then looked at me with a sad face, as if he knew something like this would happen, and called up the search and rescue team to come in the morning to look for them. They were never found. To gain an understanding of why my mother and I were out at Whitlock Lake, I have to give you a little background on us. You see, my mother and I run a wreath business in a quiet northern Michigan town. Violent crimes are virtually non-existent. It was fall around this time of year. The forests in Michigan become rich with color. This day was full of warmth and color. Instead of buying pine cones for decorating wreaths, we decided to go foraging for them in our local woods. I knew about Whitlock Lake from my high school days. Some of my friends and I went out there a couple of times to party. It's a small camping area with about 3 sites. This lake is connected to another bigger lake a few miles down the road. It is in a small old lodging town called Jennings, with a population of about 20, give or take. The times I went out there as a high school student never had a strange feeling in the air. The day my mother and I went to forage, the air was thick with fear, and we felt like we were being watched. We thought maybe it was just a small woodland creature hiding and watching, waiting for us to leave, so we continued on. About an hour goes by, and we decided to move on. We moved to where the forest meets the water. There are cute, tiny little baby pine cones that we use for our tabletop wreaths. Shortly after we found ourselves at the edge of the lake, we heard a few gunshots from across the lake. We live in northern Michigan, where people are getting ready for hunting season around this time of the year, so we shrugged it off. We got into our car and moved down the trail. When we got out of my car, I noticed quite a few shotgun shells on the ground. Again, it's not uncommon to find shells of any sort on the ground this time of year, so we continued on. We were at the end of the trail with the last 2 campsites on either side of the trail, continuing to forage for about 20 more minutes. As we walked across the trail to the next site, we noticed something very strange. At the opening of the campsite, we noticed a tall 5 or 6 foot wooden pole. On top of that pole, we saw 2 leather straps wafting in the wind. To us, that was strange. Why would someone want leather straps on a pole? Of course, we put it out of our minds and continued. A short while later, we stumbled upon an old beat-up mattress that looked like it had been there for a while. As we got closer to the mattress, the ground around it, it was very mucky. As soon as you stepped somewhere, you pretty much sunk about a half a foot down. People dump garbage in the woods a lot up here. When we started walking past it to get to the pine cones on the other side, this horrible smell seeped into our nostrils. We both looked at each other at the same time and pretty much got the heck out of there. By now, we're scared out of our wits. As we're driving out of the trailhead, we were met by a guy in a red Cadillac-type vehicle. The look on his face terrified us. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe it was all in our heads. I would like to think that my mother and I have a good sense for that sort of thing, and we got out of there just in the nick of time. Needless to say, my mother and I have never been back to the lake and don't plan on going back. About a week later, I couldn't hold this event inside myself anymore, so I called the cops and recalled the incident as best I could. They said they would look into it, and I haven't heard anything since. This happening still haunts me to this day. I'm always thinking about what may have actually happened out there. I live in a boring little town in Florida. It's an uneventful place, so for fun, or maybe just out of pure boredom, my friend and I would meet up and take late night walks around our town. We usually met up across the street from these woods, right next to a small abandoned fire station down the road from a gas station. On this particular night, my friend wanted to go explore this little path that cuts directly through the woods. It was about 1 a.m., and I thought it might make for a cool adventure, so I obliged. We crossed the street and made it to the mouth of the trail. I should mention that there was construction going on at the left-hand side of the woods, so it was fenced off, but the lights from the site slightly illuminated the trail, so we really didn't need flashlights. I had this uneasy feeling right off the bat, like we were being watched, but I chalked it up to nerves and an overactive imagination. We continued down the trail, and I start to notice weird things like branches breaking and leaves crunching just out of view. I tell my friend that maybe we should leave, and not 10 seconds later, the lights at the construction site shut off. Oh, great. The moon was pretty full, so I wasn't too worried. We didn't walk too terribly far, and I could still make out the mouth of the trail. We decided to walk back, and I felt relieved. That's when I noticed it. Crouched down in a bush not 5 feet away, somebody was watching us. I told my friend to run, and we book it, and I can hear the person running after us. We kept running, and eventually make it out of the woods and across the street. I turn to look back, and I see him right in the mouth of the trail. Get this dude was completely naked and looked insane. He had a glass bottle in his hand, and he throws it in our direction. He then grabs rocks and other things he finds on the ground next to him and just starts wildly throwing them. We got out of there pretty quickly. We didn't stop until we made it to the gas station. I noticed that my friend was bleeding pretty bad from his arm, and he tells me that right after I grabbed him to run, something hit his arm. Upon further inspection, I noticed that my friend had a large piece of glass sticking out of his arm. He needed 15 stitches. We called the cops and explained what happened, partly because we didn't want anyone else to get hurt, and because I didn't feel safe with that guy running around. When the cops searched the woods that morning, they found signs of someone living in there, and more disturbingly, bloody clothes that looked like they belonged to a little girl. I never heard anything about it since then. It starts on one cold October day. I was walking around. Even though I was wearing my parka, I felt a tiny bit cold. My dad was pulling some stuff from his truck. We hiked about 3 miles with my 2 brothers, Joseph, who was my older brother, and Miles, my younger brother. Joseph is about 17, and he's a senior in high school. Miles is about 12 and is an annoying brat. We decided to camp out today because the house was being cleaned due to a funky smell coming from the bathroom. Dad said it would be done in about 3 days, so we decided to take that time to get out of school and camp out. Our dad, about 42 years old, is pretty cool. For a single father, he is pretty laid back. He doesn't care what we do as long as we get good grades and stay in school. He was different today, however. Kind of like the time Mom walked out on us. He barely spoke and spent a lot of time in his room. He would make frequent trips to the bathroom with buckets of what I thought was puke. Today, though, Joseph noticed too, but shrugged it off as just a mood swing of sorts. As we set up camp that night, we noticed we had no signal. We tried to tell Dad, but he said we would be fine as he kept his shotgun with him. It was about 3 in the morning. A clicking noise come from his tent. We didn't know what it was, so we ignored it. Later on, our little brother couldn't quite fall asleep, so we decided that the 3 of us should go walking. We weren't scared of the woods or darkness, so we went deep into the trees until we reached the river. Stones to throw, fish to catch. It was perfect. We decided to go there. That's when we heard the gunshots. We stood there, wondering what could have happened. We ran back to the tents, quietly scanning the area. Our dad sat back against his chair as he sobbed. We were just about to walk over to him when we noticed the blood coming from the tents. Wait, not blood, Kool-Aid. We watched as he cried. Within minutes, the entire area was surrounded by the police. Someone else must have heard them. We looked in disbelief as they handcuffed him. We ran to him, and as he saw us, he cried harder. As they took him away, they searched the tents. We looked too and saw 2 giant shotgun holes in the sides. Those were our tents. He tried to kill us. The police eventually took us into custody and explained the entire thing. When my little brother was 2, I was 5, and my older brother 7, my mom tried to get custody of us. No one knows why, but she tried to get away from Dad. But what hit us the most was the fact that she didn't leave. She was there the entire time. She didn't leave us like Dad said. She was underneath the bathroom. It hit me. the dread in my father's eyes, the buckets of puke, the frequent visits to the bathroom. He killed her. He killed her and stuffed her in the bathroom for a whole decade. The thought haunts me. It was a week after that he killed himself. He didn't even get a lawyer. He drowned himself in the toilet. We spent 3 days in custody. We were then sent to our aunt's house, but she died about a month ago. Now we are being adopted by 2 parents. Nice, sweet people, fairly young compared to Dad. There's one odd thing, however. They used to have children, and there's a funky smell